Thank you everybody here. I hope you've all enjoyed the conference so far and created some great memories. You've enjoyed networking, making new friends, and a big thank you to Grusby for organising the event and making it so successful. My name is Mark Baker. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. But my talk today has gone through a number of name changes. It started life when my work manager asked me to do a talk in work entitled How to Be a PHP Guru. Well, my first thought was, why ask me? Who the hell knows how to be a PHP guru? What even is a PHP guru? Your previous speaker is maybe on that path. 20 years' time, I might consider him a guru of PHP, but it's a long, long trek. But I agreed to my manager's request as long as I could do it on my own terms, choose my own title for the talk, and make it about topics I wanted to talk about, which is when I came up with an elderly software developer's long journey through technology, which is rather long. So I gave it, I should remember to turn this on. That's better. I gave it a second title, A Life of Lessons in 30 Minutes. Except someone here, I can't see him in the audience now, Rob Allen, complained about my use of the word elderly, making him feel very uncomfortable. So I have actually retitled it, especially for Rob, Okay, who am I to teach you any kind of lessons? Well, I guess I have to start by saying who I am and establishing my street cred as a dev. Forgive my use of jargon, I am an old guy, and rather than shouting and waving my fist at clouds, I decide to go a little bit lunatic every now and again. So, oops, who am I? I've probably jumped forward there. Yep. Who am I? I revived a vanity slide. I don't often use them these days, but my name is Mark Baker. I am a PHP developer. I have written a few libraries. Some of you may have used them, but that's another matter. I'm also an English immigrant, or a British immigrant, living in Amsterdam now. And I'm senior software engineer at a Dutch-based company, Recharge.com. I say British, I'm a Brexit escapee. England voted to leave the EU. Scotland, and I am part Scottish, voted to remain. Hence the way I'm dressed today. I am proud today to be a Scotsman. Bit about my background, who I am. As I say, I'm a Brexit escapee. I left the rolling hills of England for the canals and complete absence of anything even remotely resembling a hill of Amsterdam. That was 5 years ago. And I say I'm old. I was born when most homes didn't have one of those. Most homes didn't have one of those. And what we used for our entertainment was one of those. The one that we had in our house looked very much like that. Now, a lot of you are too young to remember. You probably don't even know what those are. So, okay. Now, when we finally did get a television set, back in 1969, that was a time and a place when you could watch good, wholesome family entertainment. I have to say I was very pleased last year when I tuned into Netflix and found that the same family entertainment was still being shown. But let's try and establish my credentials as a developer now. That was a game when I was a kid. If anyone doesn't recognize it, it's called Pong. You had two controllers which managed the paddles and you tried to bounce the ball. I actually made my own. Didn't look quite like that. I didn't have the fancy casing. My mother refused to let me plug it into our television set. Televisions were expensive. We'd only just got ours. Wonderful black and white model. Well, what's the equivalent of that these days? I don't think I've even used one of those. There's so many buttons I wouldn't know what to do. That was the first computer I ever programmed. Anyone recognize what it is? Apple IIe, yes. I worked for a short time as a clerk at Reading University, and they had a couple of those machines, very ahead of their time. I was about 16, 17, something like that at the time. It was just a summer holiday job, but I used to go into the lab and do what a lot of people do at lunchtime. I played Space Invaders. And I discovered that there was a major problem with that. Every time I powered off the machine, it lost my high score. So the first lines of code I ever wrote were so that every time I finished a game, it would write the high score, top 5 high scores, to a floppy disk. And when I loaded the machine up the following day, it would load those up. That was programming for me. How many other people have similar experiences with their first programming was something to do with games? Of course, a lot of you. I'm glad to know I'm not alone and that the tradition has continued right through the generations. The first computer I owned was one of those. I bought it as a kit, built it myself. Sinclair ZX80. It had 1K of memory. Now, when you talk about gigabytes of memory nowadays that Windows takes up, I had 1K there. Following year, I bought the ZX81, which had 16K of memory. And I actually wrote a real-time graphic adventure in 16K. So when I went to university, what did I study? Theology, philosophy, and Indian religion. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, but I was lucky that I got a free university education, and I actually enjoyed the subjects that I was learning. But the best thing about the university, they had a computer science department. And again, does anyone recognize it? I'd say PDP-8 from Digital Equipment Corporation. The I/O for it looked something like that. I hope that's readable. Teletype. Printed paper output, and you could load and save your programs to punch tape. What really made university computer science department was exciting. They had an internet connection to the United States. And if I stayed in the lab past midnight through to maybe 5 o'clock in the morning, I could chat live using that teletype to computer science students in America. And I started to learn other programming languages. I started to learn C. I wrote my own version of Colossal Cave, where you couldn't kill the dragon with your bare hands. I thought that was crazy anyway. I eventually left university, got myself a job, working with computers. I was doing fast Fourier transforms for a company that specialized in underwater equipment. I'd like to be able to say it was for tracking whale migrations or for something similarly useful to mankind. Unfortunately, it wasn't. That was what it was for. I was actually working on the guidance systems for torpedoes. I was young, I might have been idealistic, but I also had a wife and a child, a very young baby to support. And because I didn't have a computer science degree, getting a job in computers was almost impossible. I had very little choice. That's what I told myself at the time. And this was shortly after what is called the Falklands conflict. The company I was working for had built the torpedoes that were used to sink the General Belgrano with the loss of 400 lives. I don't know if any of the weapons I ever built or was responsible for killed people, but I have to live with that on my conscience. It was something I got out of fairly quickly. Working with embedded code was useful. And I began to work in robotics. I even worked in Napoli for 6 months with Alfa Romeo Avio, working with their shop floor robotic systems, building turbine blades for aircraft. Then this invention came along, the IBM PC, the original open source IBM PC. And all of a sudden, every company could afford to have their own computer and wanted software writing for them. So I was suddenly able to find almost any job that I wanted. So I did a lot of work. I worked for shoe manufacturers, keeping stock of all the leather that they had. I wrote software for bottle processing plants to recycle the glass in bottles. I wrote software for flour mills to control exactly the proportions and ingredients of preservatives that went into flour. I did a lot of work in the semiconductor industry, designing and manufacturing integrated circuits. And I did a lot of work with the communications industry, building cell phones and other gadgetry that we pretty much take for granted these days. And then this was invented. And I went, wow. I already had some internet experience. I was a regular on Usenet news groups, but the World Wide Web was something else. And I loved the idea of it. So I was able to get new jobs, particularly in the education sector, classroom management systems, online learning systems, and of course the ubiquitous online shopping. I've developed for all those. I'm probably proudest of this particular website. I don't know if any of you have young children and ever visit it. CBeebies is all about the children's programs broadcast by the BBC, with information not just about the programs, but lots of games for the kids to play related to those programs. And I wrote that software for the BBC, and I'm kind of proud of that. List of most of the languages that I've written code in over the years. There's probably a few more, but I don't remember all of them. I've also been involved in open source since the days before it was open source. Who was alive in 1991? Oh, good, some of you. Did you ever play text adventure games? Did anyone ever play a game called Shades of Grey? It won an award in 1992. I was one of the team that wrote that. An award-winning text adventure. That's a claim to fame. That was open source as well. It still gets played sometimes. I believe people have emulators these days. It was written on one of those. That's an Amstrad PPC 640. I won't ask you to guess that. 640K of memory. The discs, it had 2 of those. Didn't have a hard disk. I had to have the operating system, my editors, etc. on one disk, and the actual code for the game on the second. But it had a built-in modem, 1275 baud modem, so I was able to connect to the internet on it. I still had access to my Usenet news groups, chat rooms. I wrote a little bit of threading software for an open source Usenet library called WinVN. Subsequently, a lot of the code for that was adopted into a well-known email package. Some of you might recognize Microsoft Outlook. Not that I use it myself, but Microsoft are using my open source code, or were for a time. I was also partly responsible for that. Again, an open source graphing library that I developed that a friend borrowed when he went to work for Microsoft and produced that for them using my library. And then we get the invention of the World Wide Web again. And open source became open source. But that was my first website. There were less than 1,000 websites in the world when I wrote that. And that is actually a dynamic website. I say dynamic. I had a little scheduled job running on my laptop which read through a CSV file, generated static pages, written in Turbo Pascal, for those of you that remember Turbo Pascal, and then FTP'd it up to my site. That was dynamic when there were less than 1,000 websites in the world. It's so easy these days. Then I discovered a brand new programming language. I discovered it a rather odd way. I'd written an e-magazine library for people to use, written it in Perl. Perl is a wonderful language. The only person that can understand your Perl code is yourself. And then probably only for a few months after you've written it. And I had a friend that wanted to use it, but asked if I could port it to this language called PHP. I'd never heard of PHP at that point, so I looked it up, and I thought, actually, that's a pretty cool language. I can actually read the code. So I rewrote my library for him in PHP. And God, it was a real eye-opener, being able to read my own code. As an open source developer, when I open sourced it, I didn't have to worry about the other person using it. I do a few other things besides writing libraries. I blog, mainly technical, although this year I will confess I've not written any technical posts, or I've perhaps written one. Often I have my rants about PHP internals on there, but it gets a few views every day, so I'm quite pleased with some of the things I've written, even if some of the articles are out of date these days. I talk at conferences. I've spoken about a whole range of different topics over the years. So at an event like this, I'm trying to think what I spoke about. I think 2 years ago, when it was all remote via video, and I have a feeling I spoke about PHP generators on that occasion, but I honestly can't remember. Like I say, I've talked on a lot of subjects at a lot of conferences over the years. Open source itself. That's how a lot of people imagine open source works. That's the reality for most open source developers. And yes, it plays hell with your sleeping patterns. No, I don't have a Jurassic Park poster on the wall. But I have actually contributed to PHP core and code that was accepted. If anyone has ever used SPL's data structures, particularly doubly linked lists, you have probably used some of my code in there. I've had a lot more rejected than I've ever had accepted. I did a wonderful extension to the sealed floor which allowed an optional precision argument. It got rejected because it kind of fell apart when you were returning using very high numbers. I never could be bothered to fix it. I just allowed it to be rejected in the end. Other things I've contributed to PHP core, unit tests. I still don't have enough karma for voting. It's crazy. But unit tests, I've contributed to documentation, and very, very occasionally I raise my head above the parapet on internals discussions, wade in and generally get shot down. But yes, I am a contributor to PHP core, but I'm best known for other things. Some of the older ones amongst you might know a content management system called Easy Contents, which I was responsible for developing until 2001. When I gave up maintaining that, it was taken over by the Drupal Association and became, and as far as I'm still aware, is a Drupal, part of a Drupal distribution. I'm best known, open source wise, for PHP and Excel and PHP spreadsheet. For those of you who don't know those, I've been working 16 years on building libraries that allow you to interact with spreadsheets, not just Excel, but Open and LibreOffice, numeric, not numbers unfortunately, that is proprietary, and I cannot find any information about the file structures that they use. But since we transitioned across to GitHub and Packagist, we have had over 50 million downloads of PHP Excel, PHP spreadsheet currently running at 114 million. Even if a lot of people don't use it after downloading, there's still a lot of users around the world, enough to have got it a few stars. And it's just part of a suite of libraries, working with all the different elements of word processing, presentation software. Believe it or not, this presentation was written using PHP presentation. It is a PowerPoint file that I'm running, but it was computer generated. Even PHP Visio and PHP project are covered as part of the suite. I have personal libraries for things like complex numbers, matrix arithmetic, quad trees, other data structures, and geodetic libraries, because they're all things that are interesting to play with for me. A couple that I've published that have never particularly been popular: my enum helper for working with PHP's new enums from 8 onwards, and SpyMaster, which allows you to spy on internal methods, internal properties of code, of classes, even when they're protected and private, without having to play around with reflection. 10 downloads over 2 years. I thought that would be useful for people, and a few of libraries I've contributed to, or tools that I've contributed to that aren't mine, but where I've felt that there was a need for some extra work, where it was a bug fix that was needed. I'm sure a lot of you have used those. So a lot of you have used my software over the years. I hope that's established my credentials as a developer and as an open source developer, so you'll take my lessons seriously. Oh, one last thing. I also created this little guy. Some of you might be familiar with the elephant. That particular one was mine and used to fund 40 scholarship places at conferences around the world, and to run a workshop teaching young women in Turkey how to write software code, how to use Laravel, so that they could have independent careers. I'm kind of proud of that as well. Thank you. Now on to the lessons. First lesson, one you will have heard countless times before. Never stop learning. I'm 63 years old now. I am old. I don't ever want to stop learning. If I stop, I'll get bored. I need to keep filling my head with new stuff. How do I go about doing that? Well, I enjoy those little PHP what the fuck moments. They're great fun, figuring out what value are you going to see on that screen. I might come back to that later. I read a heck of a lot, mainly books and blog posts. I'm not really into video learning, that's not my thing, but whatever rocks your boat, some people do learn a lot more from videos. I enjoy reading, I enjoy putting into practice what I've read about, seeing just how far I can push it and what crazy things I can do with it. And yes, I do look at other languages, although work-wise I'm very much focused on PHP these days. But learning isn't about keeping up to date with everything in the tech world. There's a lot more to learning. It's about keeping your mind active. Because if your mind is active in all ways, it can help your career, but it gives you other things that you can do. Some of the other things I do, your mileage might vary. I love doing jigsaws. I've discovered this crazy Dutch jigsaw designer called Jan van Hasteren, who has, shall we say, very much a comic taste in his designs. They can be quite difficult. I can't do the 2,000-piece ones, mainly because I don't have the space for them. I'd love to try, but I do enjoy doing jigsaws. I read. Not always paper books. I read from the Kindle a lot these days. Yes, I have read every single one of the books in that pile that's shown there, although that's a stock picture, but I have read them all. I am trying to teach myself Dutch. I am trying to give myself a refresher course in French using Duolingo. This week has been bad to me because I've had 2 days here and I've missed 2 days of my weekly streak. And Duo keeps having a go at me over that. So I will definitely have to remember it tonight before I go to bed. And of course I enjoy playing with my daily Wordle. And I have yet to succeed at the Dutch Wordle. Okay, you might have heard this one, maintain a work-life balance. This is something I have screwed up pretty much every year I have lived. But it is important. Take it from someone who has screwed up every year that he's lived. Maintain your work-life balance. An English phrase, get out and smell the roses. Do something other than looking at a bloody computer screen in the evening. So when I try to rectify that, again, your mileage might vary, but for me, I love visiting art galleries. I went to see a Klimt exhibition a month ago. Visiting the Kirkenhof Gardens, just going out for walks in parks is a wonderful thing to do. Going to a gig, or whatever you call them these days, kids. Yes, I did get up to dance. My legs were aching like, the following morning. But it was great music from my childhood that this band was playing. And, well, how can you not get up and dance to a bit of rock and roll? Not the best picture. I do visit old ruins. When I go on holiday, I like exploring things. There's an arena that I want to climb the walls of here in Verona. So if you hear about someone getting arrested for doing that tomorrow, you know that I was playing Assassin's Creed in the arena. Something that I did last weekend for the first time this year. I love going out stand-up paddleboarding. It's a wonderful way to just focus your mind on avoiding going in the water, so you're not being distracted. Well, if you are being distracted, you do end up in the water. You may end up in the water anyway. I did twice, but that's an occupational hazard. It's still great fun. And in Amsterdam, on the river and the canals, it gives you a unique perspective. You see things that you can't see from the canal bank. So, and if it's a wonderful sunny day, it gets you out of doors. My way of relaxing, I love the spa. I love the Leolis treatments, and where they waft aromatic steam at you, and God, it burns like nobody's business, but it is such a good pain. So those are some of the things that I do to get out and smell the roses. I'm also middle-aged, so I'm entitled to a midlife crisis. So I've done a few crazy things over the last year. I did promise that I would only show you a picture of that rather than subject you to the real thing. There is a code of conduct here, after all. But 4 agonizing full days of torment, pain, anguish over a 2-month period, and then 6 months later I went back again. And I will probably go back again at some time soon, see if perhaps I can get myself an elephant, and I don't think that's working anymore, so I shall be using the keyboard. I like going to the beach and flying a kite. My earliest memory of Amsterdam, my parents took me there when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I only have one memory of that. And that was big green field, trees all around, lovely windy day, and I'm flying a kite. And the aircraft are coming in so close overhead that I'm thinking that they'll catch this kite and carry it away. and me with it to wherever they're flying off to, or they're actually coming into land at Schiphol. So when I told my father that I was moving here to Amsterdam, he got me a kite. And yes, I have been to Zandvoort Beach a few times to fly it, and it's great. Again, it's getting you out of yourself. It's living life. So, ice skating, zip lining, both things I've done over the last year. Cooking courses. I was actually trying to learn how to make risottos properly. Didn't succeed, I'm afraid, but I did try, and my teacher was a lovely Italian girl called Francesca who was very supportive of my efforts, is probably a good way of saying it. I'm not sure if she spat out every mouthful that she tried. And going to shows, particularly something like Rocky Horror where I can dress up. You might not realise this, but I do enjoy dressing up for the occasion. And on my bucket list for this year, I'm sure I'll be corrected when I mispronounce Viertlippen. Thank you. Pole vaulting across a canal. 3 possible outcomes. I will manage it. Most likely outcome, I will go home afterwards soaking wet and filthy with mud. Third possible outcome, which could work with either of the previous two, is I will go home in an ambulance with broken bones. But it looks so, incidentally, the world record is over 22 meters. I think I would have problems with 2 meters, but other things on my bucket list, I'm trying to remember what it's called, sailboarding, kite surfing. It looks such great fun. I am determined to do that this year as well. The Bosch Parade, a little less energetic, crazy weird boats on the river Dronten, I think it is, designed based around the artwork of Hieronymus Bosch. Efteling, a theme park. I have yet to go there. I must go there. That is definitely a bucket list item. I want to learn how to give people a massage. I've been told I give people a good massage when I do it, but I want a little bit of proper training. I'm trying to learn to play the piano. I do have a keyboard. I'm not very good at it, but at least I can put headphones on so I'm not disturbing the neighbours, which is better than my other choice. Whatever you do something non-work related, non-open source related. If you don't have the time, make the time to go out. Don't make this mistake. That's the one that totally messes me up year after year after year. Learn to recognize the signs when you're approaching a burnout. There's a very good link here for anyone that wants to follow the QR code. And something I've learned over the last 2 years, I'd always been afraid to do it before, but I'm not now. Never be afraid of therapy. There is nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to be scared of, and it can really help you when you're in a bad place. And I have been in a bad place many times. Don't try and do everything on your own. Whatever related to open source, I've got a team of people that help me with my releases now, with managing PRs for me now. For you, user groups are a great place to do networking, to meet with people that experience the same type of problems that you experience, or conferences, like here today. Well worth keeping in touch with the new friends that you make here today, because they will be experiencing a lot of the same problems that you experience. They might not be able to talk about it, but you can still help each other with that. Don't try and do everything on your own. And that doesn't just relate to work. Find yourself a girlfriend. Find yourself a boyfriend. Find both. Nothing wrong with that. Because life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. There will always be storms. They take many shapes and forms. Just a few of them. Yes, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the storm. And yes, you can dance on your own. And I have done that, metaphorically and physically. I love dancing in the rain. It's great fun. But while you can do it on your own, doing it when there's someone with you is so much more fun. Have an escape clause. Something I will never actually do. Run a catfish farm on Crete. But that was always my dream escape. When I moved to Amsterdam, I had a new dream, opening up a traditional English fish and chip shop in Amsterdam. It amazes me that one doesn't exist. Until earlier this year, when I changed my dream yet again and fell in love with a boat. That is the ultimate digital nomad. So, have a dream, have an escape plan. Find a non-technical side hobby. A hustle means you have to make money from it. You don't need to make money from a hobby. It gives you something else to do. Some people play role-playing games. I used to for many years. I don't much these days. I do write. I'm writing fiction like crazy at the moment. I wish I could draw. Some people escape by drawing cartoons. I know someone whose escape is going surfing, particularly in the summer. It could be cooking in some form, making marmalade, or playing a musical instrument. You don't want to hear me play the piano. Or gardening. And I wish I had a garden and not just a balcony. Although in a houseboat, I could still put some planters there and grow a few bulbs. I'm going to skip through this because I know I'm getting close on time. Whatever you do, don't allow yourself to get caught permanently in a comfort zone. Comfort zone is comfortable, yes, but nothing ever grows there. The only way you can push yourself is stepping out of your comfort zone. And as I said, I will skip through these quickly because I'm getting a timer notification. In fact, don't just step out of it. Take a flying leap with both feet. See how far you can get. Yes, you might end up falling down, but you can always pick yourself up again. You can always step back into your comfort zone if you do mess up. But if you don't mess up, you can learn so much and develop so much as a person as a result of it. Stable life, living in your comfort zone, will end up destroying you in time. You have to keep moving. Comfort zones, they stop our personal development. The way someone phrased it to me, they extinguish all the colours and dreams that you have over time. You're too young to know that yet. Stay in the same comfort zone for 20 years, 30 years, and that routine will be killing you. So learn to keep flowing like the river. Last but not least, and I'm not going to rush through this, fame isn't any kind of legacy. I'm kind of infamous. There are a few people that know me. A lot of people hate me, even though I make working with spreadsheets a bit less sucky. But fame isn't a legacy. Legacy code, and we all heard about that, isn't something that you really want to be remembered for, nor will you be remembered for it. A few years after I stopped developing PHP spreadsheet, my name will be forgotten. I won't be anything more to do with it other than a git blame somewhere. People won't remember you for the fancy code that you write. People won't remember that wonderful routine which is beautifully architectured if it's even running in 5 years' time. What people will remember you for is how you make the people around you feel. Legacy is living on in the hearts, minds, and ethics of the next generation of developers, as far as I'm concerned. But I started my computer career building weapons. So who am I to judge you? Well, there's a lot of ways to be ethical. The person that created the zombie cookie is totally lacking in ethics. So consider the morality of what you're working on. Don't gatekeep. Don't try to tell people that being a CSS developer is not really development. Don't try to tell a database analyst or someone who writes HTML that they're not a true developer. You're gatekeeping if you do. Don't be a gatekeeper. Don't keep data that you don't need. When you're developing applications, think about how they can be abused, not simply used. Tracking software is great. Parents want to know where their kids are at night. I can understand that. The fact that someone else can hack into that software and find where your kids are, not so good. So if you're developing software, think not just about the nice case, but about the bloody awful cases that could happen. Don't burn the world. I hate any thought of working with crypto, because that's what you're doing, persuading people to generate large server farms that are using God knows how many gigawatts of electricity. Don't, or at least avoid, if you can, writing software that can cause addictions of any kind. Porn sites, gambling sites, gaming sites. And if you're developing AI systems, consider the learning materials that you're working with. Make sure that they're not teaching the AI the wrong lessons. So, be ethical. But be positive, not simply negative. If you want to support diversity and inclusivity, do so. If you want to plant trees to help oxygenation, do so. You don't have to go a full Phil Sturgeon, give up your job and plant 1,000 trees a day. It's a great thing to do with your kids. Just go out, plant a tree once a year maybe. It's a fun thing to do. Supporting open sourcing mental health. It's a serious problem in this industry. But go out. Tom did it today. Gave a talk that has probably affected everybody that listened to it in the lightning talks. He's made their life possibly a bit better, given them some guidance, shown them that they're not alone. Go out, support Ukraine. You don't have to fight. Helping Ukrainian refugees is a good way of showing support for the Ukraine. think green energy. Do what you can to promote green energy. Classic one going back to the 70s, save the whales. There's a fancy term for this. When you go out jogging, those of you that go jogging, take a bag with you. You can pick up rubbish along the way. Something that I did last summer a couple of times, going out on the canals of Amsterdam, picking plastics out of the canals just to keep them clean. The plastic then gets recycled, and they actually use it to make the boats that they send people out in to pick the plastic from the water. Or supporting Black Lives Matters. Whatever you do, do it with passion. That's the important thing. Don't simply chuck a few quid into a jar every so often to pass to a charity. Go out and be positive in what you do, and do it with that passion. Because if you can do things like that with passion, it carries over to every aspect of your life. That same passion will be there for your relationships with other people, with your partner, your boyfriends, your girlfriends, your boths. It'll be there in your work. You'll be more positive about your work because you're passionate about it. It's that passion that sets you apart, that makes you who you are, that drives you forward each day. Never, ever lose your passion. If you do find you're losing it, maybe that escape plan, that farm for catfish, that houseboat as the digital mobile, yeah. Okay, so passion is the most important thing that you can show in your lives to everyone around you. Thank you very much for listening to my TED Talk. And one last thing before I go, because there'll always be one in every audience that is thinking back to that PHP what the fuck moment that I showed you. Thank you, and you that be one. The answer is, it assigns to the value, assigns to what should be the value first, then assigns what should be the key. So you end up, when you display the key, you've got, what the fuck, PHP? Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mark. I mean, I loved your talk, and I'm sure other people did too. Thank you for all those live lessons. I am definitely going to want to either watch it again or see the slides, because I was taking pictures, photos, but yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.